It is our pleasure to be joined by a Texas legend. Fozzy Whittaker is in the house. Longhorn Network, Sirius XM. You do everything, man. What's going on?
What is happening, fellas? I'm happy to be on the show. What a phenomenal weekend for football. We always know what's at stake. I'm sad I won't be in Dallas this weekend, so y'all make sure y'all get y'all fair share of funnel cakes and hot dogs and lemonade. Take it all in if you're able to go, because I'm gonna be missing it, unfortunately. But man, I can't wait for this weekend.
Hey, you guys are coming in number one in the country for it's been first time in almost 40 years, I think.
Yeah,
So that's got to be big.
I think so, man. It's Texas hasn't obviously been in this position in a lot of times, but we all know it don't matter what the rankings are coming into this weekend. It don't matter what the record is coming into this weekend. I mean, Texas could be winless, Oklahoma could be undefeated, and there's going to be a dogfight, and vice versa. If Texas was undefeated, Oklahoma winless, it's going to be a dogfight all the way to the end. So we can honestly disregard the rankings. We can disregard what has happened already early in the course of this season because we know what's, I guess, the only different thing, which is what we're not used to for the most part, is that the kickoff is moved to a 2:30. So that might be a little different for a lot of people that are used to seeing the 11 a.m. Central kickoff. But other than that, man, getting kicked at 2:30, nothing else matters. It's all about going out there and representing.
Let's start with the offense. Fozzy, what is your expectation for the quarterback position in this game for the Longhorns?
Yeah, I think Quinn's going to be completely healthy, so he'll be back into the starting role. Steve Sarkisian has mentioned multiple times, even while Quinn was injured, that it was still his team once he's back 100% healthy. The beautiful thing about it is you have a backup like Archman, and that's playing at an elite level. And having somebody that can come in spell of Quinn Ewers to the level of degree that Arch has been able to perform, especially against UTSA and even last week against Mississippi State, that was what you wanted to see from a top tier quarterback in that position to perform and do what he's supposed to do and expected to do. And I wouldn't even say he was expected to perform as well as he did, particularly in those two games. And you saw ULM, his first official start. It was very rocky. He looked like a first time starter in that game, but the bounce back that he had the following week, I thought he showed tremendous improvement, poise, was really clicking on all cylinders. But it's Quinn's team. Quinn's going to be healthy. He's going to be dialed in, ready to go. And I think having Quinn back is the true unsung leader of this team. And as this team goes, Quinn is going to be the one that they're going to have to rely on the most to be able to perform and make some of those big plays.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly? I know he had like the ab or
The
oblique
oblique, yeah.
strain.
Yeah.
I've had it before. It hurt like hell for like 3 days, but then it was pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
are they worried about any type of re-injury or anything?
I'm sure that's always in the back of Quinn's mind and then back of Sark's mind as well as the training staff there. But ultimately, I believe Quinn could have played against Mississippi State. It might would have been uncomfortable in some moments, and obviously he wouldn't have wanted to gotten hit on it. And this is all my own personal opinion. I didn't go out to practice. I didn't have any inside information, so I don't know. I could just be blowing smoke, but I thought seeing him on the sidelines of the ULM game the week after he heard it, the way he was moving around, the way he got the team energized in the fourth quarter, he was even celebrating with some of the guys that scored in the end zone whenever they played against ULM. He looked like he was moving rather well, considering he had a strained oblique or that abdomen strain. So I figured being able to be safe and cautious, have an additional week of rest for him was probably going to be vitally important considering the road that's at hand moving forward. As you know, playing in Dallas, that game is going to be extremely physical. And then you backdoor play against Georgia at home. And then you go on the road to Vanderbilt. And we all saw what happens whenever you go to Nashville and you're not ready to play to the level that Vandy is playing at this time. So the schedule is going to toughen up and it's all going to start Saturday. And I think ultimately being able to protect Quinn over the past couple of weeks and get him as healthy as possible has been the main goal, and I don't expect to see any limitations in his game whenever he steps on the field Saturday.
I know you always have an eye on the running back position, and you're always keeping close tabs on the running game for the Longhorns. What
Hmm.
what have you liked? What have you not liked? Like what are your thoughts overall when you look at Texas's rushing attack up to this point in the season?
Yeah, just like almost any position, there are pros and cons. I think the running back room, which I touted as probably the deepest coming into the season, has performed, I would say, the worst out of all the position groups on the offense. And not because they've done anything terribly bad, but it's just because all the other positions have performed extremely well. And ultimately, the running backs have to be a little bit more consistent. I remember ULM is the game that I called, Texas against ULM. We go into production meeting with Steve Sarkisian and Lowell Galindo and I. We're asking questions about what more Sark wanted to see out of his offense. And the big thing that he spoke of was having more explosive runs. And whenever you got a guy like Jaden Blue, who's as dynamic and as shifty and as explosive as he is, he put that on display against Michigan. And we've seen flashes of it last year whenever he was able to insert himself after Jonathan Brooks goes down. Then you're expecting some of those big plays to happen at the running back position with the guy that electric and that explosive. But Texas hasn't been able to come by those big explosive runs throughout the course of the season. And I'm not quite sure if it's because the running backs aren't making enough guys miss. Obviously, the offensive line, they're doing their job. They're giving them holes. Yards per before contact is happening is positive. They're playing on the opposing side of the line of scrimmage. We're just not seeing the yak that we saw whenever Jonathan Brooks was at the helm at the starting position, whenever Bijan and Roshan were playing. Those guys force missed tackles. And those forced missed tackles end up turning into big explosive plays. And I'm not talking about 15, 18-yard runs. I'm talking about those 60-yard, 70-yard, big game breaking type of plays. And so we haven't seen Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner, or Jared Gibson give that on a consistent basis. So I want to say that's something to keep an eye out for as competition stiffens. You all know better than anybody, this Oklahoma defense is stingy. They don't give anything to anybody. And I don't care if you got a dynamic passing attack, if you got a dynamic rushing attack, they are up for the cause. And so this is going to be where I focus a lot of my attention as Texas plays a lot of these defenses that'll perform better. Oklahoma, Georgia. Like I said, Vanderbilt's playing much better. I don't put them in elite category, but Kentucky's defense played very well over the course of the season. A&M is playing really good football. Arkansas just beat Tennessee. So you're going to see some really tough matchups on defensive fronts, and I want to see how Texas is able to control the line of scrimmage and if those running backs can make big explosive plays to be able to help take some of that pressure off of Quinn and the receivers whenever it comes down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, I agree with that. How about the wide receivers? Bond has been great. To me, he stands out above the crowd quite a bit. How about the other guys? Who do you think is kind of rolling into that number two spot?
Yeah, I think DeAndre Moore is the person that I would pencil in as kind of being that most pleasant and dynamic surprise for this offense. Steve Sarkisian in spring ball mentioned how much of an integral part DeAndre Moore would be for this offense. And in my mind, I kept thinking, all right, yeah, DeAndre Moore is good. He's very talented. Like we know what he can do. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, Jonte Cook, you bringing in a five-star Ryan Wingo. Like these guys are going to be the other two lining up opposite of Isaiah Bond. And I think the greatest compliment that I've been able to see DeAndre Moore put together, DJ, as he goes by, is he shows up to work every single day and he's the same. He first up, always doing what he's doing in practice. He's giving 100% reps. He's blocking his butt off on the edge, on the perimeter. He's making dynamic catches in the game, contested catches. His speed is probably underrated because you got guys like Silas Bowden and Isaiah Bond next to him who putting on a track meet display. But every time you look up, man, DeAndre Moore is getting behind the defensive backs, and that goes to show you how savvy of a player he is, how dynamic he's utilized, and that's a guy in the slot that Quinn and Arch both love to get the ball to. And I think the emergence of his development and seeing his leadership actually continue to take off in a way that not a lot of people expected him to in the first time as a starting receiver, I think has been a pleasant surprise. But that entire receiver room has been playing well above expectations, considering you lose draft picks left and right, first round, second round. Jordan Whittington gets drafted. You lose Jatavian Sanders to the NFL draft. So your top four pass catchers from a season ago, you're trying to replace that level of production. And man, these guys have stepped in and done an amazing job. And Gunnar Helm at the tight end position, even slotting into some of the receiving yardage. It's been pretty cool to see what Steve Sarkisian has done with a new group of guys and being at the level of productivity that he's been able to put this offense in.
When it's Texas's offense and OU's defense on the field, Fozzy, is there one matchup in particular that you're going to have your eye on
R. Mason
Saturday?
Thomas. R. Mason Thomas, man, that dude is playing unbelievable right now. Obviously, I love Danny Stutzman. I told him at media day, I said, hey man, if you wasn't wearing that red, I could really pull for you publicly. But because you have on the crimson, I can't necessarily say it out loud. But I love your game. I love how you bring it. Everything that you do, like you all know, you see how infectious his energy is, how he gets the rest of his teammates riled up, ready to play. And there's nobody that probably performs the biggest in this game than that dude every single year. And he's the model and level of consistency. But man, I'm breaking down our Mason Thomas game. And man, that dude has had some of those explosive, dynamic defensive lineman impacts on games like we've seen from the historical presence of who Oklahoma has always had on defense. Man, he's carrying that flag to the highest degree. And I think that matchup, whether he's on the ends against Kelvin Banks or against Cam Williams, or sometimes if they slot him on the inside, having an opportunity to go against Jake Majors, Hayden Connor, whoever is lined up in that position, DJ Campbell, I think that's the matchup that I really want to pay attention to because it all gets started right there, which really allows a lot of what Danny Stutzman is able to do is because they do so well of a job up front. And he's obviously the guy that gets a lot of that pass rush going. So I want to see how he's able to continue that pass rush against an offensive line for Texas, who I think is performing at a very high level for the most part.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the offensive line looks great. Is there a weak link in that group? I mean, to me, they've all looked really solid for the most part.
Yeah, weak link, I would say isolating a guy like Jake Majors sometimes with a bigger physical defensive tackle. That gives him problems. And in the same way, if you get a very shifty, speedy guy that's savvy with his hands and with a quick get off, DJ Campbell can be susceptible in one-on-one opportunities. Those are the two that I always have a question mark, and more so it's really DJ Campbell because a lot of times Jake Majors is going to get support, whether it's from the left guard Hayden Connor or whether it's from the right guard DJ Campbell. But I've seen multiple times if DJ Campbell's left on an island against a quicker opponent, sometimes that gives them fits. And obviously Kyle Flood is a lineman extraordinaire in the coaching that he gives. He's able to go back and make the adjustments, and Steve Sarkisian will obviously call plays accordingly. But that's what I see whenever you isolate some of those guys where you can find room to attack and create some pressure or penetrate in the run game. I've seen that surface over the course of the past couple of games.
Fozzy, looking at the Longhorns defense, I've watched every snap that they've played this season on defense multiple times. Man, they are keeping it very, very simple
Hmm.
defensively. Is that by design? Is that trust in the personnel? Like, what has the staff said about why they're keeping it as simple as they are defensively?
Yeah, PK and Johnny Nansen have talked about making sure the guys are flying around fast. And it's a collaborative effort, especially between those two guys on where to put people to be most effective and dynamic. Now, to be fair, a lot of the reasoning why they haven't had to show more of what they can do, especially with some of the exotic pressures that Johnny Nansen is used to and accustomed to running while he was at Arizona, it's because the level of play, right? Texas has typically been the better team whenever they've gone up against their opponent. And Michigan probably is an outlier, but Michigan isn't who Michigan was a season ago, and they don't have the same passing attack and the dynamic downfield threat that we saw them have a year ago. So even then, you can play a little different with the way you disguise some of your looks and your coverages, but ultimately it's about playing fast. The defensive line being able to replace first round and second round talent, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, that was a huge question mark on how they would do it. And it's kind of a committee approach. Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, Jermaine Lole, you see Norton get in, you see a lot of those guys rotating in and having an impact. And ultimately, I think they're all the beneficiary of having a more balanced interior defensive line because no one's necessarily standing out above the rest. They're playing well, but they're not playing Byron Murphy level. They're not playing necessarily T'Vondre Sweat level, but they feed off of each other's pros and cons and their strengths and weaknesses very well. And then the emergence of freaking a superstar rusher like Colin Simmons, and you add in the kind of veteran presence that Trey Moore is able to provide. And man, that defensive line has played their butts off to be able to allow the back end to play a little bit more simple looks and rely on the athleticism. So it goes hand in hand with the defensive calls and how they're being able to apply pressure without having to manufacture kind of those blitz looks or put one-on-one matchups with the DBs across the board.
I think the game is going to be won and lost on this side of the ball.
Yeah.
Texas defense against Oklahoma's offense. On the flip side, I think you have to expect, both Texas's offense and Oklahoma's defense to both maybe trade some punches and
Hmm.
both are going to make some plays. But this other side of the ball, I think, can Texas dominate? Where do you think that they have maybe the biggest advantage?
I think ultimately defending the pass is where and we all know numbers are a huge stat, right? Texas has been really good defending the pass from a statistical standpoint, but they haven't played anybody that really pushes the ball downfield. So it's not an accurate representation of how good the back end of Texas is, although they have shown major improvement over the course of last season versus this season. Uh, Obviously, you look at Michael Hawkins Jr. and Jackson Arnold, if he does get in some where some of their deficiencies are, and they haven't necessarily passed the ball down the field very effectively, right? Mid game, short range, that's in their wheelhouse, but down the field hasn't typically been where they've made their hay or had the best bread and butter. And that's uncommon to see from an Oklahoma offense, as you all know. We're always accustomed to seeing the deep threat be there. That's what obviously gets Texas off of their kilter or off heel a lot is being able to have some of those deep shots, some of the, fake the bubble screen and then hit the receiver in the back. And it's a 30, 40-yard explosive or a touchdown. And that's where I've seen the biggest difference from this Oklahoma team versus last year was those big dynamic explosive plays downfield, not from a lack of talent. It's just from a lack of execution, in my opinion. And I think that gives Texas the upper hand to maybe play a little bit more heavy at the box or the line of scrimmage, fit a little bit more in the run game and try to say, hey, force us deep because we know you haven't necessarily had the best success at it. But if you're going to beat us, we want you beating us in an area that you don't necessarily excel at this point of the season. So I think that might be the mindset and the approach that Texas goes with and try to force the run from Hawkins Jr., from Barnes, from whoever is in the backfield and try to make it into third and long situations and hopefully get the NASCAR blitz package that Texas likes to run and get some of those rushers kind of agitating and frustrating Michael Hawkins Jr. in the pocket.
You mentioned Michael Hawkins Jr. Just what do you think about what you've seen from the freshman for the Sooners?
I think he's done a spectacular job, man, for what the expectation was coming into this season, for what he's been able to do. Like, it's not too many people that can step into his position and perform without like feeling like, oh man, I got so much pressure on me. Oh man, I got all these people depending on me. Like, I got to do this, I got to do that. Like, it to me, he's played free. And now that's what I want to see continue to happen. Like you take over the role and everything that comes with it. It's not necessarily a media shock anymore now that he's played a game and he started and he's kind of made his mark. But at the end of the day, man, he's played very freely and I love the confidence that he exudes. He's not a shy individual from a standpoint of like taking hold of the offense and making it his. And so I think that's what I've been most impressed with about his game. And obviously he can tote the rock. I remember you talking about it, Gabe, from the spring game, and you mentioned from practices that you had attended, like nobody necessarily is talking about him, and he might not get that many reps at the time because of what the expectation of Jackson Arnold was for this offense. But you mentioned the talent that he possessed and what he was able to provide every time he stepped on the field. And so I've kept that in my mind. And man, seeing it play out in the games and seeing how he's been able to actually utilize his abilities and his dynamic kind of skill set that is not unlike a lot of other quarterbacks at the D1 level. I think that says a lot about his character, about the way he approaches practice, the way he approaches game, the preparation that he's been able to put in. And then whenever his time was ready to go, he was ready and poised to be able to come in and put points on the board. And so I just like the level of preparation and his attitude from what I've been able to see from the outside looking in, and the way that he's been able to take over this offense and kind of make it his own identity.
You mentioned his athleticism, and there's no doubt, on that opening drive against Auburn, he takes as the
Hmm.
longest running play we've had all year. What what effect is that going to have on the way Texas plays defense? I haven't seen a guy with that
Right.
athleticism so far this year. Now, if you listen to Oklahoma, they will downplay anytime you talk about his ability to run, they're going to downplay that. But they've had a bye week. I would be shocked if there wasn't something thrown in there to try and create some run game. We have not been good running the football, so I mean, there's a little bit of guessing, I'm sure, going on there, but
Oh yeah.
do you think that they're going to be prepared for any type of, quarterback run game that Oklahoma has inserted?
Yeah, the level of preparation is going to be there. And to your point, whenever you add in a dynamic runner like the way Hawkins is for this offense and just his skill set, right? And you go back and look at Dylan Gabriel, and a lot of the reasons why Oklahoma was able to win last year was because the plays that Dylan Gabriel made with his legs, right? He had some really good passes, don't get me wrong, but he broke the defense down whenever he took the ball and got a first down on third down, or got into the red zone and utilized him as an extra runner to be able to get into the end zone. And I don't expect kind of that type of impact to change just because, Hawkins isn't necessarily the focal point in the run game. So I think he'll obviously be a guy that'll be featured in there. We've seen what Diego Pavia was able to do for Vanderbilt. We've seen what Cam Ward has been able to do whenever he takes off and run. We've seen what Jalen Milroe has been able to do. People within the SEC, people within the Heisman conversation, they're all dynamic type of players because they're dual threat type of guys. And I think ultimately taking away the running ability of what Hawkins is able to do would really hinder kind of the creativeness and what Oklahoma can really expand to be as an offense, especially whenever you're trying to get the run game going. Like that's another hat and another gap that you got to fill for, that could open up an opportunity for the run game to get started with the running backs, because now instead of the DN chasing down the line of scrimmage, he got to hold back one more step to be able to account for quarterback zone read or counter read, whatever the case may be. So I think being able to utilize his skill set will be advantageous for the offense. And I think it makes it obviously a lot more difficult for that defense to defend, because now you got to add an extra layer. And then whenever you get in third down situations, even if it is third and long, you got to have your rush angles on point. You can't rush past them too fast. And then if you do rush upfield, you can't leave a lane too wide, because one on one against some of these linebackers, I pick Hawkins to be able to run away from him if he has that type of space. And that's what Texas cannot do on a defensive standpoint, is give up a 3rd and 13 with the quarterback run or whatever the case may be. So I think it'd be advantageous for Oklahoma to absolutely use them in the run game.
The spread is large, Fozzy, but hopefully we get a good one Saturday, man. That's what we all want. We just
Yeah,
want another OU Texas
absolutely.
classic.
You know that spread means nothing too. I was actually shocked. I saw 14 and a half. I was like, man, Vegas don't be watching these games every year. Like, what, well, I know Vegas know a lot about betting and winning, and they are Vegas for what they do, but like this game is something special. You don't throw out double digits at that, like, and two touchdowns. Like, no. We all know that that's not finna happen. So I'm expecting there to be fireworks. Last year was a perfect example of, everybody thought one team was expected to win. Everybody thought, it was going to be, a 7 point, whatever the case may be. I don't even remember what the spread finished last year, but it was a lot bigger than obviously the gap was. And then Oklahoma pulls it off in the last nail-biting seconds. And that's the games that we love. That's why the rivalry is as rich as it is because no matter what happens, no matter what the spread, the rankings, whatever the record is, man, these two teams, they throw it all out of the window and they go out there and play for pride and they go out there and play for that golden hat. And man, ultimately a good game is where I expect this game to end up as well.
You're the man.
Well, I think we all do. You got to give us your final pick though. How do you see it
Oh,
playing out?
man, I haven't even put a score together. This is the first time I'm on the spot, and I don't know why, because I knew it was probably coming, but I do believe Texas is the better team, but we all know the better team doesn't always win. I do think they are able to avenge last year's loss. And I think it'll probably be similar fashion. I think it's going to be like a 31-27 type of game. Texas is able to get enough ahead at the beginning to be able to hold on to the lead. But I'll pick 31-27 Texas.
You're the best, Foz. As always, we appreciate the time, man, and enjoy Saturday. It's the best weekend of the year, baby.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate it, man. Y'all have a good one and enjoy yourselves this weekend as well.